Welcome to Aging Intelligence. We're bringing society's leaders together to talk about the aging of America and the aging of the world. And specifically, we're talking to people who play a very active role in helping us figure out how to build for and care for older adults in our society. Today, we are joined by a very special friend of mine, and I'm super happy to have him here, Phil Weiser. Phil, hello. Phil is currently the Attorney General for the state of Colorado, and Phil is currently running for governor in Colorado. It's the November 2026 election. Is that right? That's right.
There's a primary on June 1st, but yes, November 2026, my election to be our next governor.
All right, there you go. So I was super happy that Phil joined us because he obviously has lots of thoughts on this topic and deals with it, I'd imagine, day in and day out as Attorney General.
Absolutely. It's a big issue in Colorado and all across America.
Yeah. So first of all, just tell us a little bit more about yourself. What's your background before you became Attorney General? Like, how did you become you?
Well, I am a first-generation American. I just watched, some people might see this on 60 Minutes, a episode about people who were born in concentration camps. It's a remarkable story. You hear about all the miraculous events that enabled these survivors to be born survivors. Well, my mom was one of them. My mom was born in a Nazi concentration camp. Wow. And my grandmother's an amazing woman. She wanted to come to America. And so I grew up with my grandparents and with my mom and my dad, all of whom came to America because they wanted to be here. And I'm the first generation who's an American citizen by birth and grew up with a real love of America and what freedom and opportunity means to me. That led me to want to be in public service. When I went to college, I didn't know what that meant. I had some great mentorship, went to law school, also great mentorship, worked in the federal government, worked for judges, became a professor and a law school dean. And then in 2018, I ran to be Attorney General. First time I'm elected public service. And that's been an incredible experience. And now I'm running to be governor.
Wow. Well, that's really amazing. Congratulations. Thank
you.
And so I am very curious, as Attorney General for a state, you must from time to time get hit with issues that just come across your desk or that somehow are about the aging of society. They're like, scams around older adults or policy issues or economic pressures. Like, what do you see day in and day out in your day job today as Attorney General that kind of, is in the area of older adults?
Well, let's spend a little time talking about scams because you mentioned it. And I have regular conference calls, sort of like a call-in radio show that our ARP organizes. They call the program Elder Watch. And I get to hear from older Coloradans. And I go visit people in assisted living facilities and to talk about scams.
Yeah.
One of the points that I would make is the technological changes of the last 25 years have given the scammers so many tools.
Yeah.
Think about a classic scam. People call it the grandkid scam. It's a grandkid calling up their grandmother saying, I'm in jail in Spain. I need you to wire me $2,000.
Yeah.
That scam wasn't easy to do 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it's so easy to do that the call can sound like it is from the grandson.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can know from social media where someone is. You can take someone's voice and likeness and using AI make something sounds like them.
Yep.
And for many grandparents, they get what they think is a real call and they're afraid and they're out thousands of dollars. Another version of this scam is the dating scam. And this is true for older Coloradans, older Americans, where someone will literally court someone online. They'll build a relationship. And then at some point, they'll ask for money in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And people can be out thousands of dollars. Again, 25 years ago, we didn't have that online dating.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that older Americans didn't grow up as digital natives. They may not be as sophisticated, yet they're online and they're vulnerable to these scams. So that's a big concern. I can go down a list of aging issues, but this is one I deal with a lot because my job's to go after those scam artists.
Yeah.
And honestly, they're hard to go after sometimes because they're abroad.
Yeah.
So the best techniques are prevention and education.
Okay. And that's what I was going to ask you. So in your day job today, and then when you think forward to potentially being the governor of Colorado, what can you actually do about this? Because, my mother-in-law was taken by one of these scams. She called, fortunately, my wife when she was driving between Targets and Walmarts buying gift cards that she was reading off the code. So, this is a real thing. Our family's been hit by it. What can you actually do sitting in the seat of government?
Government, when you use this authority well, can be a powerful convener, can be a powerful norm entrepreneur. So part of what we need to create as social norms, before you buy gift cards, you need to ask, is this real?
Mm-hmm.
Before you buy cryptocurrency, before you send money transfers, we know what the tools are that these scammers use. We need people to know this looks like it could be a scam. And it's hard because I grew up in this older generation where you learn things were real. When someone was calling you on the phone, long distance, it was a big deal. People took it seriously. Now it doesn't cost anything for these robocalls to get people on the phone. It's easy to trick them. We need people to know most of the time it's not real.
And, so I'm actually curious how you think about regulation and balancing kind of, freedom of business, freedom of the people with regulation. And we can use this as a good example. So when I saw my mother-in-law get scammed and I saw the way it was done, I said to myself, Target or Walmart, they actually could have stopped this. They could have seen a card number was being bought in store X in Washington State, and then it was all of a sudden getting used in Ohio. And they clearly just hadn't yet built the systems to stop that. How do you think about, do you just leave that to private enterprise to try to fix and the market will push them to fix it? Do you think no, government really should step in and regulate something like that?
I want to lift up a point here. Many of these scam situations involve some intermediary that has some knowledge and ability to stop it. The question that I think a lot about is when do intermediaries need to act more responsibly, that we would put regulatory obligations on them. I'm going to give you a few examples that meet my test. Facebook Marketplace for years let people sell anonymously. What happened? People would steal from big box stores. People would steal from people's porches. They'd put the stolen goods, sell them anonymously, including mystery sale. The platforms, Facebook, they were, as you put it, on notice that this was happening. We had to pass a law in Colorado that says you're not allowed to sell anonymously. You, Facebook, need to know who's selling the product so that if we can see that it's a stolen product, you're not, in effect, shielding them or protecting them. And so if there's a intermediary who reasonably can take steps that prevents fraud, yes, we need them to do it. Another example, I mentioned before, these spam calls or robocalls, they're companies who deliver these calls. And they know they're coming from abroad and they know they're coming in huge amounts. We've gone after those companies to say, you can't do that. You're enabling this fraud and these robocalls.
So it's really regulation designed to protect older adults and the people more broadly if there's an intermediary that can and reasonably should take action without really too much cost on them.
Yes, and this is an area that I've thought a lot about, designing smart regulation. One that I'm sure you're going to be familiar with is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which was set up to say if there's copyrighted content that is pirated online, there's a system where you can ask the person who's hosting it to take it down. It's a notice and takedown provision. And if they follow the requirements, there's no liability from the intermediary at that point. But they also have an opportunity as an intermediary to say, no, we don't think this is a violation of copyright law. It might be a fair use. And there's a chance to determine that. There's also consequences if the person seeks content to be taken down and they're asking in bad faith. And so how you calibrate these systems is an area, it's really important to get them right.
That's super interesting. Okay, so let's meta level out a little bit to kind of the population in general. So Colorado, 6 million people. I looked up the stats. 1 in 6, so about 1 million people are over the age of 65 in Colorado. What's interesting is over the last decade, so from 2010 to 2020, it was the second fastest aging state in America behind Alaska.
Wow.
Which that surprised me too, because it actually is known to have a kind of younger population, but it's aging faster.
It's changing.
And so I'm curious, when you just think about the kind of broad macro issues that would affect, where in your role today as AG, if you're the governor in the future, that's a big portion of your population that has kind of particular needs. What do you kind of see as the biggest issues or policy areas to tackle to help that segment of society?
Let me start with one that's on my mind because I'm particularly passionate about it, and then we should talk about others because I don't think this is necessarily the most important, but it's important. We have a loneliness epidemic in America right now. Too many people are disconnected. That can be true of older adults. That's particularly true of young people growing up who are spending too much time online, not in relationships. One thing I'm excited to do as governor is to build a mentoring program that every single kid growing up has multiple mentors. I want to get more older Coloradans in the schools as coaches, financial literacy coaches, debate coaches, basketball coaches, special, teaching civics classes. We have a resource in Colorado, an aging population. We have a need, young people who need more engagement and more mentors. One opportunity is to meet that challenge, engage older Coloradans and say, we need you in our schools, helping our kids in a range of ways that may work for you. And it's a win-win because for older Coloradans who are lonely, it gives them meaning and purpose. For younger people who build relationships, it gives them, again, a sense of connection, a sense of support, and will be, in my mind, a huge game changer for their future.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting. So I don't know if you've looked into this or not, but in Amsterdam and then more broadly in the Netherlands, they have a number of programs that actually really focus on kind of taking the wisdom and time of their older population and marrying it up very specifically with kids and students.
I'd love to hear more about that. And part of what has happened, we used to have what I just said naturally in community 75 years ago. It used to be that people grew up in intergenerational environments. More people went to church or to synagogue or community groups. So it used to be that those communal connections were just there and people benefited from them. Right now, they're not just there.
That's right.
We need to be more intentional about how we create them.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Well, that sounds like a great idea. I'm curious if we think about other policy areas that affect older adults.
Let's go to healthcare.
You want to go healthcare?
Let's go to healthcare.
That's a big one.
And I wish I brought my wife here. As you know, my wife Heidi is actually a geriatrician. She thinks a lot about this. And when I'm governor, I look forward to her leading some work on aging. The point I want to start with is the one I just mentioned, which is loneliness and lack of connection. One of the challenges for people as they're getting older, do they have caregivers? Do they have friends? Do they have community? The more lonely you are, the more likely you are to have physical harms, ailments. And so how we build connected communities matter. How we build communities where people have access to different people, activities makes a big difference. If our healthcare system is better calibrated, we're checking in with people earlier, they're living healthier lives, and we're not spending as much money on acute care. And this is part of the challenge for our healthcare system. We're spending so much money, often in areas where it's really expensive, and you can look back and we could do better. We're about, as a society, to make some huge mistakes with some of these HR1, the big bad bill. We're going to spend less money on helping people with diabetes up front. What's that going to mean? More people are going to have dialysis later, or more people are going to actually lose, have to get amputations or something. So it's, to my mind, painful that our healthcare system is so much oriented around being a sick system. We're spending so much money, often at the very end of a situation. And if you just get smarter and spend more money earlier, we'll save money.
So this is so to deviate from going to different policy areas for a second and dive down on this in particular. So the challenge that I always hear when this comes up, we should do preventative healthcare. Right. And if you're a single payer like Medicare, that can make a lot of sense. If you're a single payer like Medicaid, it can make a lot of sense. But then in theory, people start running the numbers and they're like, oh my God, if we have to send a person out and we have to spin up all these programs, the preemptive cost is so high and no one wants to wait for the savings on the back end. How can we solve that from a government or policy perspective when we're, kind of low on cash, if you will?
What you've just put your finger on is we don't have a healthcare system. We have a series of fragmented efforts that don't actually fit together. Let me just give you a retort. If you're a company and you're self-insuring and you want to keep employees for 20 years, this is not a problem. The only thing that makes this a problem is what you just put your finger on, which is if you're playing a really short game and you're trying to make a quick buck right now, not worried about tomorrow, then it becomes a problem. So I think you just explained what's the problem, which is short-termism thinking. a lack of a holistic systemic mindset. Instead, people trying to do something quickly in their narrow short-term interest. So we talked before about the role of regulation. Part of what the Affordable Care Act said is to insurers, you have to provide these preventative primary care measures. I think you're not allowed to have extra payments for your regular check-in visits so that you're giving people that type of care. Again, think about cancer screening. If you're catching something early, it's a totally different situation than if you're catching it late when someone shows up and they're already in like stage 4.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And how about, because healthcare is almost, it's the thing that drives so much spending, right? And so much money. If you look at budgets, I think the budget, what's the status? Like the federal budget, Medicare and Medicaid together, something like 20%. It's like some huge percentage.
And the state level too. In Colorado, if you look 30 years ago, we spent, I'm going to make the numbers up, 3 times as much on education as we do on healthcare. Now we spend twice as much as the state on healthcare as we do in education. So it has been a huge challenge. Healthcare costs, the amount of money we're spending on healthcare has gone through the roof.
And so when you think about kind of economic challenges, so broadly in the U.S., right, we talked about Colorado's aging fast. In the U.S., we will literally have more people over 65 than under 18 in 8 years. It happens in 2034. And so when you think about the economic challenges that could drive as a society, how do you think about that problem statement?
It's a very substantial challenge for us to get our arms around, and it's a cultural challenge. Let's start for a minute with one of the good parts of that statistic. People are living longer. Right? You hear the different jokes. 90 is the new 80, 80 is the new 70, whatever. So people are living longer. The challenge that we, I think, as a society haven't done great is giving a sense of meaning, a sense of shared understanding of what retirement, or as one friend of mine put it, rewirement looks like. I actually think there's an opportunity here, and you may have read this book from Arthur Brooks, I think it's called From Strength to Strength. And it talks about this chapter, call it as people are into their 60s, as a service-oriented chapter. So if you say, what can this new time look like? How do we enlist generations who have often been successful, who've worked, who've done a lot in service? I mentioned before the mentoring concept in schools, but you can obviously go down a long list of things like community gardens or engaging in local arts and culture. It's really important that aging populations are feeling valued, useful, and part of society. And what my worry is, if they're not feeling those ways, if they're feeling like they're a burden on society, it's like a double whammy, which is they're not going to be doing as well spiritually, emotionally, and health-wise. Society is going to have to take care of them. By contrast, if we view older adults as an asset and we find ways to engage them, they're a benefit.
No, that's a really, really great point. That's awesome. Okay, so let's think about other policy areas then. Another one that comes up a lot when we're thinking about older adults is housing. I can give you an interesting issue in California where we're sitting right now, which is we've got this Prop 13 concept. Prop 13, basically, I know you're probably not familiar with it, but it basically says the property tax that you pay on your property basically can only go up at the rate of inflation. It cannot go up with the value of your home. So what it means is it's actually great usually for older adults because it keeps their property taxes low, but then it also means no one ever moves because they lose it if they move. It restricts housing supply, and therefore in California, it's really, really, really hard to buy a house right now for lots of reasons. That's one of them. So that's a good example of, policy around housing that's had some really negative externalities, albeit positive for a certain population like older adults. What do you think about housing older adults? Colorado, I have to say, during my time in Colorado, the place builds a lot of housing compared
we need
to California, even more. At least.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, but we need a lot more, and we need more of different kinds. And back to the point about cultural change, one issue that we've been looking at in Colorado is as people build these ADUs, you hear people talk about sort of the mother-in-law apartment. Can we normalize more of that? And that's a opportunity because to the extent people are staying in homes, we don't have the Prop 13 issue, but you're staying in homes that you don't need anymore. It's not from a societal standpoint efficient. If you can instead have that mother-in-law's apartment, again, it can be a win-win for the family, and it can be a better use of the space. So it is a thing to be thinking about, how older adults are living, and are they on their own at times that may be more challenging. At the same time, and this is something that is an important conversation to have, respect older Coloradans, our family members who want to keep living independently, how they best can do so. It is a really hard conversation, and we hear a lot people saying about, when do you talk to your parents about giving up driving? When you talking about giving up living independently? We haven't gotten as good at having those honest conversations as we probably need to be, and we need to create the right tools so that people, when they're willing and able to live closer to family in like an ADU or in other types of support living arrangements, that we make that easy to do. Yeah.
So I can tell you on the housing policy that you brought up, ADUs. When I was in Colorado, I noticed it was pretty hard to get approval to build an ADU, and they were very, very restricted. California recently passed a statewide rule that basically said all municipalities shall grant the approval to build ADUs anywhere. And so what we did is we built an ADU, and that is where my wife's parents live. So
you're living what I just talked about.
So I am living what you talked about.
How's it working out?
Oh, it's amazing. Because what ends up happening is, you've got the grandparents right there on the same property as the kids, right? Because remember, so many people are sandwich generation. I am sandwich generation. My wife's sandwich generation. And so our kids get to grow up really like literally interacting with their grandparents. Their babysitters when they were younger, when they really needed them, were their grandparents. But it's a separate building. So it's not like you're not on top of each other. Everybody has their own space. And I was really surprised that in Colorado, it was hard to replicate that same thing that, California had created.
We're having that conversation now. And it's an important challenge to try to work through because it has this huge benefit, and municipalities zealously guard their local control. And so you have this natural tension between the state and local governments. I believe this issue may even be in litigation in Colorado right now.
Interesting. Okay.
So I probably have to be careful what I say about it, but it's going to be an important societal conversation because I do think normalizing this ADU can have real benefits. And I'm glad to hear it's beneficial in your family. I do also worry for California, and to the extent it happens in Colorado, is are we using the houses we have efficiently? Because we need to build a lot more housing, and we should be thoughtful about the housing we have. Is it being put to the use for the best of society? Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Okay, so let's do another policy area that actually matters a lot for older adults, which is labor, right? So we have, I think it's, personal care aides, which is the way Bureau of Labor Statistics defines the people who walk into the homes of older adults and help them actually stay in their homes and age in their homes. And it also is the same category that'll go into facilities, right? And help them with facility, not with medical things, but with, get out of bed, get food, get dressed, et cetera.
Which, by the way, directly relates, if you are walking regularly, if you are eating better, you're going to have fewer medical needs. So having the care you need is an investment in your health.
Absolutely. So there are 3.8 million of those positions in the United States. It is now the single biggest job category in the United States of America.
What's the number for child care? What's the number for child care?
I don't know the child care number.
Because it's interesting, because I got this question actually at a campaign event, which is, how are you going to help create a better workforce and better pay for both those who support
for the caregiving workforce?
Caregiving, older and younger.
And so, for the older adult area, PCAs, it's 3.8.
Okay.
It's also one of the fastest growing by percentage categories in BLS. So even though it's now the biggest, it just surpassed retail workers.
Right.
It's also still one of the fastest
more
growing.
Than retail workers. I'm still digesting that.
Retail workers. And it's just because, again, you've got such an aging population where these people need care.
Well, and AI is not going to replace that job category, but retailers, AI and automation is starting to replace them.
That's right. And so, labor in this space it's a huge, huge issue.
Yes.
So one area is, how do we get enough of these people? Because we actually literally are not we do not have enough of these people,
Yep.
which is one interesting area. And then the other one is, how do you balance kind of the needs of labor with the needs of the population that, get that help from the labor?
Right.
So why don't we just start first on how do we get the labor? So we are short.
All right. So I guess we have to talk a little bit of immigration right now, because
Feels like
a good percentage of caregivers for older Americans are immigrants. And I remember my grandmother who had a caregiver who was an immigrant, and it was a beautiful relationship.
Yep.
The immigration policy that we're seeing right now at the national level is counterproductive. The American people, I believe, want an immigration system that is sensible, that is fair, operates in the rule of law. We should have a system that if people are dangerous, if people break the rules, they can and will be deported.
Yep.
But we shouldn't be trying to create fear, wreak havoc, undermine people's lives. A lot of people are trying to follow the rules, do the right thing, and they're worried about or getting deported. So the first answer to your important question is, we need a stable and smarter immigration policy, knowing that these jobs are jobs that naturally immigrants are often going to gravitate to. Because when you come here and you think, what skills do I have? One of the skills you're going to have is to be a care worker. Yep. And we need care workers. So that's probably my first answer. My second answer is to think about the following question I haven't thought about, so I'll just put it as a question.
Yeah.
How much overlap is there in caregiving for people who take care of kids, I'll call it 1 to 5 years old, and older adults, whatever the category is, 75 to 100?
Yes, I can tell you what we tend to see is actually really interesting is the people who take care of kids often are not the same people who take care of older adults, because they have kind of different preferences.
Yep.
And then you even see in the labor pools for older adults, you'll see one pool of people that like to go into homes and a different pool of people that like to go into facilities, because it turns out that even how you care for an older adult in a facility tends to be more bouncing from room to room, where you're seeing lots of different people all the time. When you go into someone's home, which is what people classically think of with, kind of nannies for kids, it's much more of a one-to-one relationship. So you actually have these segmented workforces. One of the things that we think about in terms of drawing locally from the, people currently in the United States is, and you said it, AI will take a bunch of jobs, right? But then a bunch of those jobs could turn into, for some of the people, I could become a caregiver.
Yeah.
But now you're getting into, how do you reskill a population, right? Because there are skills that people need to learn, and each state has their own kind of regulations around what those are.
Well, that was where I was going to go with you, which is, how do we conceptualize what these caregiving skills are?
Yep.
How do we create credentials so that we know people have achieved them?
Yep.
And how do we make those credentials portable across states so that we're lowering the friction? And in lots of areas, nursing and counseling, for example, we don't do this that well. We don't have a good workforce development system. Yeah. We make it harder for reskilling. We don't have credentials that are portable. So there's a huge opportunity. It's something I thought a lot about for what I want to do as governor, to develop workforce development systems that are highly functional and easy to interact with.
Yeah.
Too often they're not functional and they're hard to interact with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you, so this is a really interesting area that the people watching this are probably a lot of people are going to be in this industry of older adults. And one thing that this industry has seen is you'll have some states that basically say no credentials at all for caring for older adults. Like it's just, free for all. And what tends to happen there is the good actor providers, right, that provide some kind of care, create their own kind of level of, screening, obviously, but then also training and ensuring that people are following the rules and delivering good care, et cetera. You have this opposite end of the spectrum where certain states will say, okay, there has to be this, and this training, and it amounts to like 35 hours or 85 hours of training. What happens in those states is the labor market becomes insanely tight because there's not enough people going through those training programs. If a company sponsors the person, the fear is they'll sponsor them, but then on the other side, they won't actually come work for them, right? Which is a real thing that happens because we're in an industry where in general, you're talking about 80% churn rates, right? So if you have too much, this is a great example of too much regulation, you actually end up in, I have no workforce. Not enough regulation, you're reliant on the good actor companies, right? And then there's a middle ground somewhere.
Let me play with this a little bit. And when public policy proceeds from an honest, open dialogue, it can be a thing of beauty. Yeah. When it proceeds from a lack of facts, from ideological commitments that are immune to factual analysis, and a yelling contest, it is hard to watch.
Yeah.
In this conversation, what I'd like to see is the following, which is if you have, let's call it the unregulated model you mentioned, how do we make sure that companies who are the good actors have the ability to earn public trust because people believe them? My worry for any sector of an economy is if you have no oversight at all, no one knows who the good actors are and no one trusts anybody. So if you're in a sector where there are good actors doing the right thing, they want some form of oversight and enforcement so the bad actors can't actually destroy trust and make it so that no one thinks anyone's doing it right.
No, and you know, I think that I have actually seen that. So I've seen that in the completely unregulated states, that can happen, where you'll have these bad actors that kind of destroy trust for everybody. In the, I'll call it lightly regulated states, that in my experience has actually been the best because you're weeding out the really terrible stuff. You're creating a level playing field, but everybody has to meet a certain bar. And that's kind of a certain min level of kind of safety and quality. And then people can trust that market, right? And then once they're in that market, may the best product win, so to speak.
A friend of mine, Jim Crow, who is CEO and founder of a company called Level 3, said, regulation should be like garlic in cooking, which is as much as you need and no more.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, cool. All right, totally different question for you that I'll bet people watching this don't know much about. At least I don't, so that's why I'm asking you. Federal government versus state government around helping older adults, around policies for older adults. Like, what is the line? What should federal be doing? What should state be doing? You know, you just mentioned we should have portable credentials, which I completely agree. Like, I can tell you, we're in all 50 states. Very painful for us that every state is a different system of credentialing.
Can we imagine that we have a normal federal government whose goal is to improve the general welfare and the other key concepts that the preamble of our Constitution have, which is to say our current federal government is trying to wreak havoc and to create chaos almost at every turn. And so as I think about what a federal government should do, I have to first let go of the fact that our current federal government is one of the more challenging relationships for a state we can ever have. Just to put this out there for Colorado, I've had to sue this federal government 53 times, which is way more than I had to sue Trump 1. And so it's not a matter of ideology. It's a matter that this administration is willing to break the law, and we've won the clear majority of these cases already because they're not following the law. So if you're in a functional world, federal versus state, let me give you my take on this. The federal government has some huge advantages, which is they can do research. They can develop best practice. So we have a National Institute on Aging. It would be great if that was used with a sustained research agenda and the federal government's power of convening to say things like, when you're taking care of older adults, here are the key measures that you should be looking at and that you might want to monitor. Because states aren't going to always know these questions. They're going to be figuring it out. And to your point, they're all doing different things. And then the federal government can also help states come together in different environments where we start exchanging ideas on best practice and try to align in a way that we're more harmonious. So ideally, the federal government has both the power of research to set voluntary standards and the power of convening, bringing people together. When I worked in the Obama administration, we did all those things. For example, smart grid was a concept that we were working on where we tried to develop research about what a smarter grid could look like, set standards, and then would bring together leading state regulatory bodies to say, here's what you could be doing. That's a powerful role the federal government can do. But ultimately, to your point, the states have their individual authority. They're going to make these decisions.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And then from a back to an economic perspective, if you're a state or if you're the federal government, and I just don't, because I'm worried about my budget, I guess, at some level, right? If I'm going to run a state, I'm worried about my budget. If I'm looking at many, many more older adults who are not earning active income, so my tax base, I would think, is going down somewhat, right? If I keep aging, yet my expenditures have to naturally go up. Like, Is there a solve for that, or is that simply deflationary and there's nothing you can do about it?
I don't know enough about Japan to make this analogy, but aren't they facing a population like that right now?
For sure. Yeah. And China's going to too,
China
right? With
too.
one child policy.
So we're going to learn, and we're watching this question, which is, can you manage a society if that proportion gets out of whack?
Yeah.
I have the worry that you do.
Yeah.
I don't have enough a priori commitment on it because it's possible. And there's some states right now that have made themselves retirement havens where they would say the older population here, they actually have income because they're earning, whatever interest income or dividends, or they're getting Social Security or pension. So they're paying income taxes. They're paying property taxes. They're productive members of society. It's also possible, to your question, that in some situations, older adults are less producing of income and more requiring services. So I don't know enough to say, again, from the abstract, is it a threat or not?
Yeah.
I have some concerns that from how do you literally run society, you need a certain number of people in the workforce. Yeah. And so you got to get that one way or the other.
Yeah. I'll tell you, about 20 years ago, when I was a business school student, I went on a study trip to Japan. And we met with a bunch of the political leaders, and we met with a bunch of the CEOs of the major corporations there. And 20 years ago, every single meeting that we had with every politician and every business leader, they brought up the aging of society. It was like the first thing that they went to as a problem area for them to solve, because they didn't know the answer to this very question I just asked you, right? And they're kind of staring down a much more aged society than we were at the time. We're kind of getting to where they are, but it is true. We can watch them as a model.
We have three options. We're an aging society like Japan. We continue to attract and welcome immigrants, and or we have kids. Yeah. American history, we've never been an aging society. We've always been a younger society because we've welcomed immigrants and we've had kids. And now we're at this moment. It's not clear where the future is going to go.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting to watch. Okay. I have one more kind of policy area for you, and then we're just going to close it out, I think. But technology policy.
I thought about that a little bit.
Yeah, and particularly around older adults. Like, how do you see that interplay? What do you think matters there?
Well, let's talk about, back to where we started, and let's talk about AI. Yeah. AI has extraordinary positive applications, including the same technologies that have extraordinary negative applications. A friend of mine has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I'm able to hear him use his voice because of what you might call a deep fake technology. They take old audio, they use it. He can actually type and speak, and it's his voice. That same technology is what enables the grandparent scam. And so part of the challenge for these technologies, and AI is what we're talking about now, you've got these great applications that are really beneficial to society, and you've got some that are potentially very scary, frauds or how it spreads misinformation. And I mentioned earlier, part of the challenge is how do we educate people to use these technologies? How do we create norms in society? And where are we going to have civil or criminal liability? Think about, you hear about revenge porn and people using pornographic images. I think a lot about this because you're not going to stop the technological changes. They're here, they're going to happen, and they're going to change society, and we've got to be able to find a way to meet them. And part of what makes this challenging is technological change is accelerating. And so people are even less, I heard the scary thing about AI, the people studying AI, coming out research about AI, it's already out of date by the time it comes out.
Yeah, for sure.
So it is a formidable challenge. And back to my earlier conversation about the federal government, I wish we had a high-functioning federal government because we need a lot of research. We need a lot of shared convening. And if you get 50 states trying to each do their own thing on this, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, the one thing that's really interesting to me about kind of this area, technology and aging, is it feels like it's a great area for government to use what you called its convening power Because there's this other question, which is, what is the role of government to work on how we help people age in society? And what's the role of the private sector to work on how we help people age in society? And technology is a really good example where private sector can probably come up with a whole bunch of stuff. And then if the two groups, if the government group and the private sector group really work together, you could amplify the good stuff in there.
Well, and I am thinking about this. And again, I'll be curious to hear as you think more about it, where are there analogies between childcare and care for aging populations?
Right.
Because in Colorado, the cost of childcare, the difficulty of finding childcare, it's having a direct influence on whether people are having kids or not, or whether they're having kids in Colorado, or whether they're staying in the workforce. And so how does government use its power of convening, work with state and local government, work with nonprofits, or work with businesses to provide more childcare access? It's something I've thought a bit about. And for those who want to learn more, you can see my plan for it at philforcolorado.com.
And I was going to ask you that. Do you want to take a moment to just talk about your campaign?
I guess you've been hearing me talk about why I want to lead, how I will lead, some things on my agenda. We've talked about housing and getting more housing than people can afford. We've talked about childcare. We've talked about protecting people from being preyed on. We've talked about education and mentoring. If you go to our website, you can look for our Colorado Blueprint. It's 100 pages, talks about everything that we're facing, because now is not a moment actually where you can just take on one issue. We're facing a range of challenging issues. We need government to work for people. I've been working in state government. I know how I can lead as governor. I'm excited to be able to serve, and you can learn more. And even if you're interested, you can buy merch. My wife always tells me to plug the merch. We have a dog bandana. Even you can buy
bandana.
Dog
All
bandana.
right,
You
there
can
you
buy.
go.
So we've got our dog now has his own Instagram account, the People's Pooch. If you want to follow him,
That's awesome.
If you want to follow me, it's at Phil for Colorado.
Okay, so Phil for Colorado.
Phil for Colorado. You can follow me.
.com.
philforcolorado.com. You go to our website.
All right, last question for you, Phil. So when I interview people for jobs at Honor, I always ask them, why, at a fundamental level, do you do what you do? So
Can I use a prop?
You can use a prop.
This is a picture of my grandmother.
Okay.
And
who's your grandmother
my
holding
buddy
there?
is holding my firstborn.
Wow.
And my grandmother was a great grandmother in both senses of the word.
Wow.
My grandmother, as I mentioned earlier, survived the Holocaust and gave birth to my mom in a Nazi concentration camp. And growing up, knowing that my life was a miracle, that I'm even here, really gives a sense of purpose. And my grandmother was an amazing person in terms of having a sense of purpose on her life. She was always a very positive person. She never met a stranger. And what I carry with me as my why is to serve and to make a positive impact. And that's something that is a way of giving back to the fact that it's U.S. Army soldiers who liberated my mom and my grandmother from the Buchenwald concentration camp and the country that welcomed us as immigrants. We talked about immigration a bit. It's obviously personal to me. And I want to keep serving the America that I know and love. And that's why I have spent my life in public service, why I've run for office, why I'm running for office.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Phil, thank you so much while you're on your visit to California to come here and talk to us on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Great to be with you, Seth.
It was great to see you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.